Hi, you are watching special coverage, Decoding World Economic Forum 2025 with me, Ashwat Ismail and Najib Aruf, here from Oxford. We are going to decode all of those that have spoken by world leaders, corporate leaders, as well as civil society organizations in World Economic Forum 2025. I think most important, we'll break into several areas. Number one, most important, that took the center stage, ASEAN. Second, artificial intelligence and challenges ahead and what's coming. That is most important for us as society as well as businesses.
And also I'm going to touch about Trump 2.0 is one of the main focus at World Economic Forum. And of course, when you talk about ASEAN, when we talk about World Economic Forum, it's always a Eurocentric forum. We always discuss about how do developed countries manage the world problems, and also with the help of the developing countries as well. But at the same time, this year, with the Malaysia as the chairman of ASEAN, ASEAN took a center stage at the discussion, extensive discussion at World Economic Forum in terms of ASEAN. And naturally, we expect a lot of questions about ASEAN in terms of the Western countries and then Euro countries understanding ASEAN as a whole. And Prime Minister Dr. Ibrahim has mentioned about and also being asked about whether ASEAN will become the EU 2.0. Let's listen to what Prime Minister has to say.
Intra-ASEAN trade, and work together to complement one another. So that is comparative advantage. So the economic fundamentals in terms of trade, investments, to me is important, and the way we negotiate with the other countries or regions. But whether we want to then emerge to become like EU is something that we have not explored. Our advantage is to study EU, the successes and the limitations, and we are not too concerned about the political setup. We are more concerned about the economic collaboration.
Now we understand the difference between ASEAN and also European Union in terms of the collaboration of economy. The ASEAN focus on the fostering collaboration of economy, while the EU involve political aspect as well. That's the difference between ASEAN and EU. And then this is the understanding of ASEAN is more clearer.
I think the message from ASEAN leaders were very clear. There are three key components in this. Number one, I think it will go on to impartial and adaptive strategy or adaptive approach, in which the question here, are we the bridge between the two big brothers, China and United States of America under President Trump? And second, ASEAN is an attractive investment bloc, and given the fact that Asian trade is expected to rise to $7 trillion by 2030, of course, we are set to be the fourth largest economy in the world. And let's hear on one piece of advice from Chief Advisor of Bangladesh government, Dr. Muhammad Yunus. Among others, I would take out one particular pertinent point in which we cannot build ASEAN based on the old footsteps of others. So we need to find our own uniqueness, find our own way, and thinking about how to rewrite development for this particular region of ASEAN.
What kind of future that we see for ourselves as a region, as a country? We follow the same footsteps that the West has done as a success, and same development paradigm that we have learned. And I'm always saying, no, that's not the way we should do. We should create our own way of what we see as a development, as a future of our countries, and so on. One of the things we said, all the issues and definitions and the concepts that we have adopted from the Western way of looking at it, can be redesigned. And that's one of the things is the whole banking system, whether banking system should remain connected with the people with money. Can it be redesigned to bring it to people who don't have money, starting with that? And that's what the changes in the microcredit came as a change for that, addressing that, challenging the whole banking system. Banking system has to be redesigned. And that led to us another issue which we want to share with ASEAN, as a part of ASEAN, we will have to work together to make a different kind of society that we have right now, following the same kind of old footsteps that we do. Avoid the whole wealth concentration issue completely, right from the beginning. Because otherwise, if you follow the same step, we go back to the same thing with all the concentration of wealth.
Okay, speaking of ASEAN, Najib, I think regional integration holds a lot of promises, and in this case, we cannot run away from two things. Number one is artificial intelligence, number two is digitalization. And coming from Singapore, of course, our biggest focus would be DEFA, Digital Economic Framework Agreement, because DEFA and trade, these are two important elements for this particular region to grow even further.
Yeah.
Let's hear from the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore.
Connectivity also relates to free trade agreements, the arrangements that we have with our neighbors, ASEAN, and with the rest of the world. Singapore has 27 free trade agreements with different parts of the world. We cover more than 90% of the world's GDP. So that is very important. But lastly, I think that we touched on just now, and that's digital connectivity. So in addition to physical connectivity and free trade agreements, we also need to be able to digitally connect up with our key trading partners. That is harder to do because it's both ends of the digital connectivity. So not just Singapore, but our destination, our intermediate points also have to be digitalized. So I think this is something that is a work in progress. We continue to work with our partners to develop and enhance their digital capability. And that's why we have the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement to help the whole of ASEAN level up the digital capability.
Okay, now this is a real thing, and everyone is trumpeting about, which is President Donald Trump. And I guess his session with corporate leaders, top CEOs, says everything about the way forward for United States of America.
And of course, Trump mentioned a lot of things about the unfairness in terms of world trade between US and also European Union. He mentioned about how this has to change, but at the same time, it has received the reaction from the Christine Lagarde, the president of European Central Bank. That's going to be played later. But let's listen to what Trump had said about the unfairness between the trade relation US and also European Union.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of deficits with the EU, and nobody's happy with it, and we're going to do something about it, but nobody's happy with it. So I think the EU has to speed up their process. Friends of mine that are in some of the nations within the EU, great people, they want to be able to compete better, and you can't compete when you can't go through the approval process fast. There's no reason why it can't go faster. So, you know, I'm trying to be constructive because I love Europe. I love the countries of Europe, but the process is a very cumbersome one. And they do treat the United States of America very, very unfairly with the VAT taxes and all of the other taxes they impose.
Security of supplies of
And of course, Trump mentioned about the relationship between US and also Saudi Arabia in terms of investment. We know that Saudi Arabia announced about $600 billion investment into the US, but Donald Trump asked the number to be increased, to be rounded up to $1 trillion.
Okay, this is the best part. The critic somehow, I think the critic to Donald Trump definitely would say this is the era of pay Trump era. But somehow we need to connect with how Donald Trump is going to, in terms of his new style of leadership that the world leaders need to play along with. So let's hear, in terms of investment, I think this is a very important element, and how to make sure to look into so-called the stability in the Middle East, because you cannot run away from what Trump has said. He wants to be the unifier as well as the peacemaker.
And it's also reported today in the papers that Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that because we've been very good to them. And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love. by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago. They're very responsible, actually, to a certain extent, for what's taking place. Millions of lives are being lost.
And of course, we have direction from the president of ECB, European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, and also the president of Singapore, Mr. Tharman, where basically Christine has said that the unfairness between US and EU need to have a proper discussion and also diplomacy discussion in terms of that. At the same time, she somewhat criticized the way Trump had said about the unfairness between US and also EU, where she said that this is not a direct conversation and direct deal. It involves a lot of things and a lot of structural changes in terms of both relationship EU and also US. Let's listen to what she has said about the relationship, and also at the same time how Singaporean president views the trust deficit and erosion in the world.
What is true is that there has to be negotiations. There has to be trade relationships that are organized in a framework that is giving confidence to the partners. It cannot be about, removing all the rules, ignoring the institutions. The world has, 190 plus countries that are members of the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, 191. And it's about all of us operating together, as Tharman said earlier on. So, yes, you sit at the table, yes, you negotiate, yes, some countries are in a stronger position than others, but we all need each other. If there is one thing that the Europeans have learned over the course of time since the end of the Second World War, is that you cannot go alone. You have to work together. You have to respect each other's.
We have to avoid moving in a gradual, grinding way towards fragmentation and towards some breaking up of the world into blocks. It's a real risk. So what do we do using all the agency we have? The middle powers, India, ASEAN, Europe, Japan, the international institutions. What do we do in between those two extremes? Between the unattainable ideal of prosperity being indivisible and avoiding at all cost a zero-sum world. There's a lot we can do. There's a lot that we can do. But start from the reality that there are strengths in each of our nations, very well described. The US has a unique set of markets and institutions that drives innovation in a way that no other nation or region does. And as Christine says, Europe has human capital, and I mean it not just in terms of expertise, but in terms of values. It's a font of the values that we admire in today's world. Asia has a desire to keep opening up, to keep breaking barriers. Asia is still striking FTA deals. And we now have the UK joining the CPTPP, and there's several others on the waiting list. So build on these strengths.
Okay, speaking of Donald Trump, Najib, I think the next two analysts, the soundbites from the next two analysts, is very important to see how are we going to navigate between the rivalry of China and US. So, of course, on top of that, we are trying to navigate the way forward for this particular situation. Whether the two big brothers is going to go into very intense competition or otherwise. And let's hear from these two particular analysts.
Well, anybody whose crystal ball is clear probably hasn't understood the problem. So it's hazy, but I would say if you try to take Trump seriously, but not literally, and you take the time to watch his antics and watch the rallies and watch the tweets and read between the lines, you can get some pretty good clues about what's likely to happen. So I would predict that 6 months from now, the Ukraine war will be over. You asked about China. I think China will be part of the deal. I think that it'll settle roughly at the current line of division, which is where it will have settled a year ago or the year ago or the year ago. Trump's repeated line about this is endless, useless killing. Each year, Ukraine is in a worse position than it was the year before. This is set for a deal if there were a deal maker. And he's looking at it, and I think that's what will, I would suspect that'll be a big piece of it. Indeed, if you look at his inaugural speech and the press conference, he wants to be not only a deal maker, but an international deal maker who's a peacemaker.
But I do think the U.S.-China relationship is probably the one that is most problematic to get a deal. I think that we are heading towards a trade war and towards a more strategic decoupling of the economies. One reason for that is because Trump isn't just focusing on tariffs on China, but he's also focusing on third countries where there are pass-throughs to the U.S. The only way the Chinese economy is succeeding right now is through their $1 trillion export surplus. And so you see Trump and his team focusing a lot on Mexico and India and Vietnam. The other conversations they're having bilaterally, one of the top priorities is squeeze China coming in. That's very hard for China to respond to. You've already seen Sheinbaum in Mexico. That's been her top priority. Before she even meets with them, we've got a Mexico plan that is going to take the Chinese out, right? So I think that makes it much harder. And I also think China's complicated. And Graham knows this well. I mean, the only reason we've stabilized U.S.-China relations in the last year and a half is because there are 25 high-level cabinet-to-cabinet bilats channels that have been set up. There's an enormous amount of effort put into the relationship. So I agree with Allison that Trump has an orientation to meet with Xi and have a good meeting and, you know, flatter him a little bit and say, come on, let's get to a deal. But getting to a deal with China will require a level of execution, implementation that's far more complicated across the Trump administration. Not to mention some support from the GOP in Congress. We're nowhere close to that. So I actually think that in the coming months, we are heading to a dramatic shift.
Okay, now we don't know what's coming with regards to artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, AGI. And this is the most important part. I think AI has improved a lot up to the point that going to beat human beings, so-called. This is the premise of argument saying that, you know, on the IQ side, AI has developed one of the best so-called technological advancements at this point in time. But how far AI has to be regulated, these remain questions, and it varies from one region to another.
This is really interesting because in one of these sessions, they were discussing about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and this AGI will mimic the human as close as possible in terms of having EQ as well. But at the same time, we understand that even the company of AI who owns AI technology and all that, they don't really have the absolute answer on how to control AI. At the same time, we have the academician side during the same panel who actually looking at the risk and also how do we manage this in terms of the rapid development of AI. Let's listen to what the owner of the company of AI had said about AI development, and also what the academician said about the risk of losing control of AI advancement.
I've become probably in the last 3 to 6 months more confident that we really are heading towards AI systems that are better than almost all humans at almost all tasks. My guess, and I'm still not certain of it, but I think with some of the things we've seen with models starting to be as good as PhD students in areas like math and programming and biology, it is my guess that by 2026 or 2027, we will have AI systems that are broadly better than almost all humans at almost all things. The way we're not used to thinking about things is, what if we have millions of copies, I called it a country of geniuses in a data center, of agents that are better than humans at everything? What limits? Do we just immediately solve all of the world's problems? I don't think that happens. For example, self-driving cars are difficult. So I think we're going to be limited by the physical world, by deployment cycles, and often by laws. If we take the pharma case as an example, we still need to run clinical trials. There's still physics and biology, but I think the AI systems will get better at things that used to be late-stage clinical trials can become early-stage clinical trials. Things that used to be early-stage clinical trials can be done in vitro. Things that can increasingly be simulated. So I do think there will be a great acceleration. If I had to guess, and this is not a very exact science, my guess is that we can make 100 years of progress in areas like biology in 5 or 10 years if we really get this AI stuff right.
When people talk about AI being dangerous, I think it sounds a lot like talk about your laptop computer being dangerous. Absolutely, your laptop can be dangerous because someone can use your laptop to do awful things, just like someone could use AI to do awful things. We should pass laws to stop them. So that's how I tend to view AI. There's an alternative view of AI, which is not mine, which I think is if AI is this sentient alien being with his own wants and desires, it could go rogue. In my experience, my AI sometimes does bad things. I just program it to stop doing that, and I can't control it perfectly, but every year, our ability to control AI is improving.
Indeed, we are on a path where we're going to build machines that are more than tools, that have their own agency and their own goals, and that is not good. And you're saying it's okay, we're going to find ways to control them. But how do you know? Like right now, science doesn't know how we can control machines that are even at our level of intelligence, and even worse if they're smarter than us. Nobody knows. And what we find in the behavior of AI that exists today, but presumably even worse when they are smarter, is that they also find loopholes. When you have contrary objective, like make a lot of money and respect the laws, well, you find a way to interpret the instructions about what's moral in a way that favors some other objective. And it's exactly the same thing that is happening with AI. So I think it is a fundamental problem. It is we need democratic process to try to clarify what we want from AI.
One is that because we don't know, we need more investment on scientific understanding about Gen AI. The fact that we know how to create that doesn't mean that we actually understand it. The fact that you can give life to humans doesn't mean that we actually understand how the body actually works or mental health works. We still have a lot to find out. Similarly, the fact that we know how to create Gen AI doesn't mean that we know how to control it or we know how things work. We do not know the limits of it. I wish that things progress slowly, personally, even though I'm very much in the middle of it and excited about it. But I wish it goes slow, but it's not going to go slow. It's only going to go faster. In that case, what can we possibly do? I think we need to invest more into the efforts of making human lives better using AI, as opposed to just making AI better for itself. And what I mean by that is try to address really hard questions that humanity faces. Like, it could even include how do we deal with natural disasters, wildfires? Is there a way to somehow simulate it, somehow predict it, and then also find a way to slow things down, address the outcome better?
Now, the theme of World Economic Forum 2025 is about collaboration at the age of intelligence. Now, collaboration has been always the constant message of World Economic Forum for the past 5 decades. And of course, this year is no exception as well. So one of the panelists was talking about the erosion of trust that's happening around the globe. Let's listen to what Masood Ahmed, President Emeritus Center for Global Development, had said about this.
I think one of the lasting consequences of the last 5 years is the erosion of trust between developing countries and rich countries, because rich countries have made a lot of promises which they haven't followed through on in terms of going from commitments to delivery. If we really want to solve common problems, and we can't deal with the problems we face without solving them together, we have to first start repairing this breach of trust.
That is about erosion of trust. Of course, in the same panel session as well, they talk about investment and also financing for developing nations.
I think now is the time where we have to relook into development.
Yeah.
And besides relook into development, what really matters? While they are talking into rewriting development, somehow or other, the question definitely about investment. So we have to listen to Lord Nicholas Stern, the analyst, very prominent analysts, in fact, during that particular rewriting development session in which WEF and Astro AWANI, as well as Lutfi Siddiqui from Bangladesh, in which he's also part of the special envoy to the president, to the chief advisor, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, on moving forward for Bangladesh, and of course by looking into how we can actually moving from so-called stagnant middle income country and forward.
So we really do have to rethink policy, rethink the role of the state. And to conclude where Masood concluded, if we are able to get behind the investment, particularly in the developing world that we need, that new approach, that new path of development in our hands is enormously attractive. And it will be fast, it will be rapid development.
So I agree that we do need more funding, more concessional funding, better pricing of that funding, better terms of that funding. But I don't think it's either or. Money matters, but governance matters as well. And the risk pricing for these countries, we have as much of an obligation to get the story right and then sell the story right in order to affect the pricing of that. I don't think we should deflect from our need to make governance improvements. I look at Malaysia, for example. I mean, just in the last 12 months, amazing investments in data centers, semiconductors, that sort of stuff. So there are some really good stories where you can turn vicious cycles into virtuous cycles. I would hope that all of you would essentially act as reforms watch in countries like Nigeria and Bangladesh as well, so that you hold our feet to the fire, whoever is representing our countries at the next Davos. Make sure that we deliver reforms that are felt by investors, by people, by citizens at the retail level, because that really is as much of an imperative as is the investment imperative.
Youth is also one of the focus at the World Economic Forum. Professor Muhammad Yunus was quoted as saying that the youth currently, the youth now, is the most powerful youth ever in history because of the technological advancements that we've seen now. They are now not just the country's youth, but they're the global youth. The movement is so powerful that the world cannot ignore. Let's listen to what he has said.
Power comes to them not because they are super intelligent. They are the same kind of kids that we used to be. Power comes from the technology. That technology changed them. They are not Bangladeshi young people anymore. They are global young people. So that global young people, when they get connected on an issue, I don't think anybody can stop them. So Bangladesh is just a spark coming to that. So Bangladesh should be studied. You know what, which bothers me? All these things happening, we're reading in the newspaper, we talk a little bit, stop there. We're not studying what happened in Bangladesh. Universities should be rushing there. What happened to the most powerful government of 16 years? Understand for a few minutes when these young people just got together. They didn't have a political philosophy. You'll be asking, are they leftist? Are they Islamist? Are they terrorist? It doesn't come into any category. You don't have a category for them. You see everybody there. All the citizens, all the young people of Bangladesh got together.
Yeah, of course, at the end of the day, when it comes to new development, with technological advancement, it goes back on how we can strengthen talent. So youth, indeed important, but at the same time, moving forward from WEF2025, the takeaway point here is everything is new. There will be no surprises anymore. Why? Because AI comes into play. So those are the questions that I think all of us have to ponder, not just leaders and corporate leaders, and also businesses, but people, civil society at large. And that's all from us, from Oxford, to Decoding WEF2025 on Astro AWANI.